everyone. Welcome back to another episode of now what's called the Asia DeFi Network podcast. Today, we're very excited to dive into a topic that has been top of mind for myself and a lot of people in DAOs for quite some time, which is social tokens. And on that topic, we have one of the early adopters and pioneers for social tokens, Bradley from Roll. Hi, Bradley.
Hey, Shi, what's going on? How are you?
Great, great. It's so good to see you again after some time. And congratulations again on the fundraise announcement that happened in October.
Thanks for being a part of it.
Awesome. All right. And as usual, we're going to start off with a little bit of background. I think everybody would love to learn about everybody's crypto's journeys. So, how did you get into crypto or Web3?
Yeah, so I know everyone's journey is super unique. I think my journey started professionally in 2015. Um, just became a little fascinated with Bitcoin and a few other protocols at that time, and ended up all roads ended up leading to Coindesk. At that time, Coindesk was four people. It was a head of events, editor in chief, and a few journalists and some a head of operations. And so they didn't necessarily have a head of research. And so I pitched myself as a head of research, even though I just wanted to learn and get paid for it. And I got the gig. So I was hired by Ryan Selkis at the time, who now, of course, leads Masari, and Pete Rizzo, who is now the editor in chief at Kraken. And I led the State of Blockchain report. So, really big fan of Mary Meeker's State of the Internet report, and just kind of cloned that name for the blockchain space, and was really in charge of putting together these 100-page reports that came out at the end of every quarter, so every 90 days, things like GitHub commits per blockchain per quarter, or like mining market share per country, all these metrics. And effectively, when Ethereum forked in 2016, I had to dive into that as well, and started learning about Ethereum then, and really never looked back. And now I'm just building on Ethereum.
Nice. And there were so many things that could be built on Ethereum, right? I think back then, there were all these layer ones getting built, and there are so many ICOs being launched on various utility tokens and like real world use cases. And nowadays, of course, it's all about DeFi, NFTs, and now increasingly social tokens and DAOs. How and why did you decide on role and social tokens as your niche to commit to?
Yeah, I think back then I really had this inner thesis that creators were going to take over the internet. They just really didn't have a chance to extend their value like beyond platforms. I was very much like a creator economy person. Like, I remember the day that YouTube created the donate button on the page, and I was like, this is so cool. All of a sudden you can give directly to creators. This is their response to Patreon. Um, and I always felt like those things would never be enough. Like, what's going to give creators like literally superpowers? Streaming's cool, like all these things are cool, but what's going to give them like real economic superpowers? And once I found out about Ethereum in 2016, just diving into it more, I was like, oh my god, this technology can create this end state for digital communities where they actually have a monetary system that's completely independent of platforms. And it's literally something like platforms can't offer that. They have no reason to offer that. It's not in the DNA of what they do. And so it became very clear that, all right, someone needs to connect the dots between all of these Web 2 users and this like new alien like technology that allows you to create your own digital assets that are interoperable and all these things. And so, you know, this was like the premise of Roll, right? So we didn't intend to be like, we were building right alongside DeFi with things like Uniswap were almost an idea at that time. Things like Bancor were around. So we knew we didn't want to build something that was so, Web3 native and specific, like a DeFi protocol. We wanted to build something that could like cross this chasm potentially, which is where we are now. And yeah, that was the premise for Roll.
All right, we've talked about crossing the chasm, right? Superpowers, all that for someone who's a bit new might be getting confused. So, shall we now just summarize role in one or two sentences? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so Roll quite simply is, the vision of Roll is to really increase the GDP of the creator economy. We like to say that Roll is, a financial infrastructure and a set of APIs for social tokens. So we really allow creators, communities to come to Roll and mint, send, receive, buy, and integrate their social tokens into what is now dozens of platforms and will soon be hundreds of platforms.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think one analogy you were making quite a bit is that role is the Stripe for social tokens, right? And of course, beyond that as well, because it's not just payment and not just using it as money, but a lot more applications as well.
Yeah, Stripe really identifies themselves as sort of like economic infrastructure for the internet. And we kind of think that way for social tokens as well. Of course, they're known for payment processing. Roll may be known for minting or for the interface we have. But realistically, we want to be financial infrastructure for the whole category. So right now we're minting with hundreds of creators, and we're starting to get outreach from all the way from FANG companies all the way down to seed Series A startups, companies that are farther along as well. And so the next step is integrating Roll into these companies. And we think this is really where the exponential growth and Cambrian explosion of social tokens is going to happen.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to pick up on what you just mentioned, which is social tokens. Generally, people have been thinking about it as like personal tokens, right? We talked about like creators, and that tends to be individuals, and so that's what people are familiar with, right? Social money issued by people, but also it can be applied, like you just mentioned, to companies, brands, platforms, or even kind of like bigger communities, wider communities. And we've seen some social tokens being launched by Bankless or Gitcoin, right? So how would you think through these different levels or different categories, right? How would social tokens or social money and the coordination of it work differently for each of these levels? And can you walk us through some examples as well, and perhaps some upcoming ones on roll?
Yeah, so would love to. Yeah, so we're around 350 creators in, and we're super excited for what's next. I would say there's no clear delineation, like there's no dictionary level definition. The term has just been very fluid. So Roll was so early that the term social token didn't even exist. We kind of had to make up terminology and really push things forward, show that this is monetizable. Luckily we were right on time and we're able to build on top of Uniswap and create our own front end, and have that be for creators, and there's so much going on there. But generally, yeah, you could define a social token really as this new way to represent community. So it's this fungible token that's specific to a community and can create this deeper sense of belonging and liquidity, and really create this new sense of ownership. And so, yeah, this is pretty unique to Web3, and unique to community. So, if we have a She token and you have a She community, it's very different than everyone in that community owning ETH or Uni or Aave. We all identify and have a sense of belonging around that community. Because it's called She. You may call it a personal token, but someone at Misari or someone at Coindesk may call it a social token, and you would both be right. The premise of these things is to build community, but really this is the premise of all tokens we're seeing. We just are starting to see it beyond the protocol level, and so this is the way creators are doing it, and it's awesome because we'll always probably see DeFi protocols in the hundreds or thousands, but you'll start to see these tokens in the millions very soon.
Nice, nice. So your take is that tokens issued by individuals versus like if they were bigger brands, bigger companies, like essentially the economics would be or the mechanisms would pretty much be the same. You expect the way it works to be the same, like the reasons you would issue and how they would capture value and create a community around it. You wouldn't draw a big distinction.
I mean, the utility is really up to the creator, right? So someone
Mm,
like Whale Shark on Roll has basically innovated the concept of having a vault. We now know that is almost like a generalized concept. You see a lot of people, starting to call them collector DAOs or just vaults that hold NFTs. And so Whale Shark kind of originated that as a massive collector, pretty much becoming the Mr. Beast of the social token category with just the largest market there.
mm,
And yeah, so they have a gated community which has now become really popular. That's an idea we really pushed in 2020 that we wanted folks to get excited about, and now we're there. Everyone's excited about it. And so the idea of locking up, or holding a certain amount of tokens to gain access is now kind of commonplace and a feature there.
mm,
But if we were to mint with like Chipotle, there'd probably be a bit of a different model. There's some fun stuff there you can do with card issuers. There's obviously the transaction element of how can I get these tokens back as a reward, or how can I spend them on food or anything else. And so that may be very different than
mm.
what a creator's doing. But the goal is the same, really. It's to just evangelize community and get them to the point where they could achieve ownership.
Right, right. So it's actually more differentiated by perhaps what kind of products or services or platforms that the brands or creators are on, right? If it's a media versus like a food outlet versus like a merchandise kind of platform, right? Right, right. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
And
Sorry, go on.
oh yeah, and some of the exciting stuff is like a lot of people don't understand how early we are. Like I could tell you, two or three platforms that are going to exist and why they're going to exist, and it'll completely change the utility of what's going on. So, um, there's millions of people online every day that create polls, for instance, and so the idea of like a token gated poll, where you can vote in someone else's token, but it's like very fun. It's not on snapshot. It's hey, what color should my hair be today on this for this YouTube video, or things like that. Like that'll completely change the utility. You'll start entering situations where the supply side of the experience and community isn't determined by one creator. So that's not to say that like we're in the She Discord and I need 100 She to get in. You'll start seeing platforms where I could just self-expression itself is a digital asset, and I could literally, create a post. And in order to see my post, let's say I'm a cool influencer on this new platform. In order to see my post, you'll literally need to hold 100 She. And
Mm,
so what that'll mean is like the long-term utility and like the supply side of experiences is completely independent from you, the creator. And so as you start to see platforms like this emerge, it'll be a lot easier for very, very mainstream people to start issuing tokens. So this is
mm,
like you'd enter things like Rihanna having a token and others, because it's a lot less dependent on the things that they do on the supply side, and like their fan base can just go wild. Like who wouldn't want to create content that was gated in Rihanna's token, and said like who's the biggest nano Rihanna coin? Let's call it Navy. That's what she calls her fans. So like who's the biggest, Navy micro influencer who can
mm.
generate or evangelize the Navy fan base the best. And so those are very fun economic games that like haven't come out yet because people haven't built those types of platforms. Roll's really taking the position of being the infrastructure there. So like we're not going to go out and build a TikTok Twitter or like a TikTok crypto or a Twitter crypto competitor. Like we're just going to help folks achieve those things at scale.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and speaking about bringing in more mainstream people, I think there's always been this idea of like hard innovation, right? And people tend to relate to things that they're familiar with. So one analogy I've been hearing people talk about is, oh yeah, these are like loyalty points. Like sure, companies have loyalty points. Creators can issue their own loyalty points. But in Web3, we know that it's so much more, right? Once it's tokenized, you can then have, like you said, the community can run it by itself, right? Have your own utilities, make it transferable, create your own like interactions with the token, right? Which let's talk a bit about how tokenized social tokens or social money is different from the Web2 loyalty points on whatever servers.
Yeah, like so the first thing there is just the economics, right? So like American Airlines can have literally an infinite amount of loyalty points. They can mint them whenever they want. They could adjust them. Someone can create some scheme and they could just say, oh, let's issue 1 billion more. And so that has a time and place. If you don't want anything to extend beyond a certain value, that's sort of a good way to do it. Also, American Airlines points are within the American Airlines ecosystem. So there's some applications kind of like an exchange. We could like exchange loyalty points, but it's still within that system, which is to say that like if American Airlines wanted to shut it down, they easily could. So obviously when you enter Web3, this is a fascination. This is like if you want to get into like what some other platforms are doing and things like that, is like another differentiation. So if like you're minting on layer 1 and you haven't like, kind of concepted a side chain or something like this, regardless of what happens to Roll, tokens issued through Roll will still exist. And so that's very exciting for creators. They can truly own their economy. And also the economic parameters are right there on the blockchain. You can look it up. And so Roll kind of initiated and introduced this like 10 million standard for tokens that you're seeing a lot of creators have, which is really great. And so there's very clear mental math on like, okay, this person has 10 million tokens, and this is how we're going to use them, etc. So that idea of like the value being platform independent, and also just the idea that they could represent value outside the platform is kind of one of the big differentiators.
Yeah. So what I hear from you is like the verifiability that that the token supply is exactly what's stated on the blockchain, and then also that you can then use that for various purposes between different communities as well, right? I can do like swaps, interactions, and you can also integrate with all the DeFi protocols, right? Be it like exchanging it, lending it out. I don't know, bundling it together in an index. There are so many things that you can do once it's actually tokenized and not kind of within the confines of like a specific company or a specific creator.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the most beautiful things, right? Like Roll doesn't need to create a DEX. Like Uniswap
Mm-hmm.
works really well. We don't need to create another blockchain. Ethereum works really well, so we're able to utilize all these things and really grow a new creator economy. So like DeFi is creating a new creator economy, and so that's exciting. We don't know what it's going to be called yet. People just call it the new creator economy, but it's exciting.
Yeah, yeah. And so when we talk about these like composability or DeFi interactions, I think one of the things that people think about the most, so when you talk about Uniswap, is that like, okay, now I can trade these social tokens. And that kind of brings on a different dimension because originally it's just about transferability, right? It allows you to like give it to me very easily. Now I want to sell it. And so where is this liquidity gonna come from? How important is it to incentivize liquidity? We see this as pretty difficult issue to tackle for DeFi protocols, right? And for social tokens, and how will they be managed?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Things that folks have learned on the DeFi level, on the DeFi protocol level, they're learning at like the DeFi creator level as well. So there's creators on Roll that have, I just checked, the highest is $9.5 million of liquidity. So that's more liquidity than I think most protocols have on Uniswap, which is fascinating.
Hmm.
But the method is very similar. So a lot of them are doing staking in some aspect. So they're saying, "Hey, I love She. I'm a part of the She community. I want to, increase liquidity here." And so you, as the creator of She, you'll say, "Hey, if you contribute your She and ETH in this pool, I'm going to give you more She. I'm going to allot, a pool of She that I'll distribute to all She ETH contributors at the end of the month. And we're seeing that that's really enough to build, 5, 6, 7, 8 figure, liquidity. And so, yeah, that's the beginning. And as you were saying, it's really important that this liquidity isn't owned by Roll or Coinbase or Binance or really any company. It's really beautiful to see that being open source liquidity owned by the community, because that means at any time, for whatever reason, anyone in the community can enter or exit, regardless of where they are, or sort of any other blockage that would have happened in a centralized platform.
Yeah, community owned and provided liquidity is a rather beautiful thing. At the same time, I think in DeFi as well, people experience some sort of challenges, right, with say liquidity mining programs, because you get a lot of like mercenary capital who are there to farm the yield, and then they'll just sell the tokens. They move on to the next farm with higher yield, and then so there are newer mechanisms coming up, right? Things like bonding, with the help of like Olympus Pro, for example, which helps you like control your own liquidity. And in that case, well, I guess then it will be controlled by still by the community through some sort of voting, perhaps, or initially by the creator. But it's interesting to note that then it's kind of like creators need to know DeFi in order to do well in the social token space, right? It's not they can't just focus on their own craft. Would you say so?
Well, I think that's where Roll comes in, right? So, like, I think a good analogy here is like Squarespace. So, yes, you could, spin up a website in any number of ways, or you could use something like Squarespace and just kind of spin up a website really easily. Same thing with Shopify in the US and online stores. So with Roll, you're really able to spin up or roll your own token fairly easily, having like a set supply and all these things. And so, we're starting to integrate some DeFi tools as well. So you may see staking on Roll soon. You may see a whole, host of features that allow creators to, automate liquidity very easily. I think when it comes to DeFi, like the creator economy will learn from protocols.
Mm,
I don't think it'll be the other way around, because
mhm.
there will always be more value locked at the protocol level than at the creator level. You'll definitely see more utility. Like, we may teach DeFi protocols some things about utility that could be cool, but there'll always be more value locked at the protocol level for sure. So just learning what happens there. So we'll probably enter like the V1 DeFi creator very soon, which is just like, staking and rewards. And we'll probably have those same problems that you're seeing with mercenary capital. And then we'll eventually move on to maybe Olympus style stuff and some of the other things we're seeing.
Nice, nice. Yeah. So because I mean, you have the crypto native crowds and yourself as well. So then we can then templatize some of the best practices and just offer it as like a one click or a module kind of thing for creators to just enable very easily on the platform.
Absolutely.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I wanted to go a bit into the technical level as well, because nowadays I think we're seeing a lot more possibilities. So not just from a DeFi side, but also from the NFT side of things, right? I think this year has really shown the level of growth that is approaching mainstream adoption and mainstream awareness, at least for NFTs. And a lot of it comes from these like profile picture NFTs, right? Or like artists who are creating. So in a way, that's also the creator economy, right? They are selling their work or their products directly via NFTs. And so I want to dive into a bit on a technical level, right? How would you think about the differentiation between like the social token that they're minting versus like the work or the product itself, which can be an NFT? And then we're starting to also see some things in DAOs, for example, where like we talk about reputation, right, social credit, and those may or may not be transferable as well. So you kind of have a new type of token that's maybe still ERC20 non-transferable, or kind of like fungible but non-transferable tokens, NTFs is a bit of a radical concept. So like now we have a whole kind of like suite of different types of assets, different token standards to use, right? Would Roll provide all of these? How do you think about these different types of assets?
Yeah, so I think how we think about that is we have like an internal mental model that we use.
Mm,
Whether like, hey, should this be an NFT or should this be a social token? And it's really helpful because people pitch us and they're like, hey, I want to do this. And we're like, oh, that may be better here. And so I think if you step back, like a whole summary of like everything in Web 2, you can call like user generated content, whether it's like likes or posts or anything like that. And you can see there's user generated content platforms and there's categories, etc. And they all have a commonality, right? They all have a centralized backend, and this is, creators make content. I think with Web3 and a blockchain backend, the difference is creators can now make their own capital. So it's a new mental model when you think about Web3 and creators, from user generated content to what we call internally user generated capital. And we call it that because you're creating assets, you're creating digital assets, whether they're NFTs or social tokens or whatever. Um, and I think what we know so far, like that concept of user generated capital, it can bifurcate into like two categories. So category one would be content as capital. And then category two would be like community as capital. And so content as capital has like, kind of really exploded first, I think, as it should, and taken on the form of NFTs. So anything you see in Web 2 as content, on a successful Web3 platform at its height will become an NFT. That's how we think about it. So a TikTok video, a YouTube video, a song, any piece of content. And like content, there will eventually be a small, like a small amount of winners, but it'll exist everywhere, right? So like many people will be creating content, and that's what we're seeing right now. Many people are creating NFTs across platforms, which is great. That's healthy for the space. When it comes to community as capital, that's a little harder to do it. There's a reason there's like five social token platforms versus like 600 NFT platforms. It's fairly hard to do and think about and think through the model. It's more exciting for us, but this concept of like community as capital, very much related to should very much be fungible, should very much be interoperable. The more liquid it is, the more successful it can be, especially in an open source way, because it can plug into anything, right? It can plug into a video game or an exchange or a lending platform or sort of any of these things. So that concept of user generated capital has been really interesting for us. I think when we think about things like reputation and other things, we're not quite sure where that exists, or like data tokens we've heard of, or like
yeah.
these like those are almost too new to classify. We would still think about it as like user generated capital though, but yeah, we're just thinking about the big stuff now. So NFTs and social tokens.
Right. So content or like works and products, you would put that up as NFTs, whereas capital, you would put that as a social token or ERC20.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
community capital, social tokens, content capital, you could say, definitely NFTs.
Yeah. Yeah. And so a bit on the tokenomics for this, right? I think the tokenomics for other tokens like DeFi tokens has evolved greatly over the past few years, right? From the few years ago, it was all about ICOs, or all about fundraising, right? I'm distributing tokens to whoever will pay for it. And then we quickly realized that's not a very good way to distribute tokens, because you get speculators, they're there to like, yeah, wait for the price increase and then sell it. Whereas now, like increasingly, I think last year we've had more liquidity mining, right? Or like incentive mining. You have to use the product, you have to provide liquidity, some useful action before you can get the tokens, and then subsequently you can use it for like governance. You can use it to get a share of the fees. And then for social tokens, I imagine that would be more templatized almost use cases as well, right? I would imagine along similar lines, you would want to then make sure that when you're distributing the tokens, you're creating value, right? Like be it you're buying my product, you're buying my book, you're joining my community, right? You're doing some sort of engagement that provides value to the brand or the community in general. And then you would need to then also capture value with some sort of gated access status, or like you said, a premium kind of access to certain content, right? Is there are you kind of seeing a few archetypes or templates for tokenomics spinning up as well for social tokens?
Yeah, so we're super early, but it's going to be really fun because there's going to be so much more utility than like, protocols. Um, what's super interesting is, there are somewhat like Web2 components to Roll. So it's the wallet structure is such that it's very similar to Coinbase. It's just a bit more social. So the Roll wallet can, for instance, very easily plug into Twitter, and you can connect your Twitter wallet to Roll, and you can tweet out tokens very soon and do things like this. And this is kind of why we built it this way. But you could also, withdraw those tokens and plug them into any smart contract application. Um, and so I think this is kind of like where we are right now, or where we're about to head to. So we're really excited about platforms that have millions and millions of users, and that are looking into Web3 and social tokens, because they're still going to have those users, but there's going to be like Web3 components of the platform. So a lot of things that you're thinking about around staking, like as an obvious way to solve like liquidity, for instance, it's going to be a really interesting way to engage with users, but it's not going to involve liquidity, right? So you can conceptualize something like, let's say in order to listen to this podcast, you need to like stake tokens, and then maybe you'll receive like another token or something like that. So like new concepts are going to emerge that just don't make any sense at the protocol level. So someone may invent a concept called like stake to listen, right? Showtime or HBO may create a concept called like stake per view, where you need to like stake in order to view the content and you get new tokens. So like these things are going to start to emerge, and it will be sort of like listening mining or watching mining. Like it'll be a similar vibe, but it'll accomplish a different purpose. Staking is a beautiful thing to like accomplish a means to an end right now, and we're probably about to see it at the application layer in like a big way. And yeah, we're gonna kind of be a part of it all over the place, but there will be many entrepreneurs that like take that in many directions.
Yeah, yeah, I hear from you staking as a primitive coming on, and a lot more models that will come. You mentioned something really interesting, which is kind of like tweeting out tokens, right? Or I mean, presumably, I could, for example, do like a Twitch live stream or a YouTube live stream, or I could be like at my book signing, and you can come up to me and get some tokens when I sign your book, for
Yeah.
example, right? And all these needs to link Web 2 infrastructure or physical kind of like interactions with Web 3, and traditionally that has been quite a challenge, and this is exactly what Roll is trying to solve, right? How does it work at the technical level? How do you actually tie the Web 3 platforms with your wallets or on chain?
Yeah, so on the Web3 side, we mint tokens. So we have like a minting factory contract. We vest tokens, which is now customizable. So you can vest tokens for a second or a day or 10 years. It's completely up to you. And so this is all on the smart contract level. So it's, you can kind of read it there. And those tokens are minted either directly to any wallet you want, a Gnosis Safe, MetaMask, Trust Wallet, whatever you want, or the Roll wallet, which most people choose, because they're kind of new to Web3, and they may not use MetaMask too much, and that's fine. It's kind of like where we are. There's billions of users on Web2, and kind of like maybe a few million daily active on Web3. So the Roll wallet is kind of like a Coinbase style custodial wallet, and so from there, it's a simple sign-on process, and you could from there we've built APIs that allow other applications to kind of be used easily. So Roll and Collabland work well together, for instance. So you can sort of use the Roll wallet to get into any Discord. through that token as well. And so similarly in that manner, Roll can start to really create new forms of utility that many people can understand at the Web 2 level with social tokens. So on Twitch, there was a very popular bot. They acquired it actually, and this was the reason they created something called channel currencies. So there was a bot that some kid created called Revlo. It was genius. And so Revlo allowed you to set a certain amount of channel points that you can deploy to a stream. So if I'm watching your 9-hour stream and I've been there for like all 9 hours, and like, another kid just came in the last 2 minutes, he's going to get like a very small percentage of that pool. But I'm going to get a very large percentage. So it's almost like, incentivizing this listening and engagement. And so, we're really interested in that. And so we'll start to think about that with like social tokens. But asking every one of those users to like have a MetaMask and like, their own wallet and create it and understand what a seed phrase is would be really tough. Other than, aside, instead of just kind of like making it rain tokens and just signing up really easy with a Roll wallet. So those are the types of things we're kind of about to do that are basic and we've thought about for like over a year. We've just been building out the Web3 stuff, pushing the category forward. There was really nothing else besides Roll in 2019 or 20. So just making sure this was a category and the timing was right. But 2022 is just going to be really fun. And so beyond that, there's obvious things that are like going to be super fun on the application side. So like we're probably going to have a bunch of hackathons and just think about categories. Like what's the future of social tokens, chat, and like spatial audio? Like how can social tokens interact with like Clubhouse? How can social tokens interact with learning applications, things like Udemy, or classes? How can social tokens interact with, games and the metaverse and streaming? And so those are questions I think, a lot of other entrepreneurs are going to try and solve, but we'll just kind of be the infrastructure for that.
Yeah, you just mentioned a whole bunch of stuff, right? From like the Web 2, Web 3, and then different categories coming up. Sounds like there's a lot happening. But I'd still like to kind of dive still into the kind of like bridging here, because yeah, I think as you mentioned, for example, the Twitch channel points, those are very interesting, or like tweeting it out. And like I can imagine, let's say, if I were to map the channel points onto Web3 onto tokens, like just to distribute these tokens, or like if I want to distribute them over like every minute, every microtransaction, every time somebody comes in and views and kind of like accrues in the wallet, like the gas fees would just be insane, right? So I presume either we're going to have some sort of like off-chain storage or accounting mechanism that you need to have that is a bit trust dependent on Roll itself, and also the APIs with the Web 2 platforms, or we need to do it with like a very low gas environment and be able to map it like constantly onto on-chain data. So what kind of, are you doing both? Which approach are you going for?
Well, I mean, you could build the ladder now. You just won't get like Ninja to use it, right? Or like you won't get like a lot of people to be like, okay, now we need to hop on like this L2, and and it's super cheap, trust me, but like not a lot of people are gonna do that. And so one of two things would need to happen. Like all of those people would need to really get familiar with, like ZK Sync, or, or Polygon, or like whatever folks are using, or a new type of Web3 streamer would develop. And so we're not really bullish on either of those things. We just want to come to where they are now. We think the next Twitch will probably be like later this decade. We're not going to wait like 7 years for that to happen. We're just going to go to Twitch and kind of build a bot. We're just going to go to Twitter. People have been trying to take down Twitter for like literally, I think like 15 years now. So it's probably going to be around for a little longer, and we're fine just being a part of the Twitter stack until something else comes along. Yeah.
Yeah. Like rather than replace Web 2, we're kind of like harnessing Web 2. And there's this idea that, the communities or the people are actually the underlying layer or the base layer for all of these Web 2 things, right? So if you have a way for the community to self organize and identify each other through the tokens, then like technically they can port onto any platform. And hence you don't need to disrupt them. You give users and creators like the optionality to switch platforms depending on who is treating them well, right? How exploitative they might be, because now you're able to self organize and through social tokens partly.
Yeah, I mean, Roll got this far, like truly from like being very contrarian to what I'd say like the majority of Web 2 people think, but also like the way some of, broader Web 3 may think. So like you could remember, like 2017, 2018, like there were massive social platforms that were creating their own token. And and they thought this was the way. They thought this was the future. Every creator on my platform is going to use my token, the platform token, and that's how it's going to work. And they're going to engage and kind of do all these things. And we really thought that was kind of silly that wouldn't be the reality. Everyone's going to want their own economy and they want it this way. The last thing they're going to be interested in is this platform token, unless it somehow benefits their token in the future, but it should be completely independent. And so yeah, that's kind of we kind of made our name there. But yeah, we're still gonna think contrarian. Like if everyone's thinking, hey, like Web3's here right now, like Web3's ready for 1 billion users, like we don't necessarily think that. We're gonna still try and connect the dots until that's true.
Yeah, you started to talk a bit about the model for role, right? Because like you mentioned, we want to have a thousand. In Chinese saying is a thousand flowers bloom, and also not necessarily having your forcing everybody to use your own token. So let's talk about economics of role itself, right? I understand that firstly there's kind of pre-programmed template for people to issue, and we kind of enforce a 10 million total supply, and 2 million is unlocked, and the rest is kind of like vested over 3 months. Would you like to just share why you have designed it in such a way?
Yeah. So when we created our V1 smart contracts in 2019, thinking about it in 2018, there was nothing to go on. There was no concept of a social token. That name didn't exist. I think there was one project that was like messing around, but on that project you can create an infinite amount of tokens, and you couldn't like act like it. So we really have to like standardize this, and so we just wanted a number that would be simple. I don't think Twitter really chose 140 characters in the beginning for any like specific reason, but it did represent like this brevity. So this is a micro blogging platform, and this is what you do. And so we wanted to represent this abundance but scarcity. And so having that amount of tokens really shows that okay, this can be some sort of you know wealth that I can create through this token. How do we think through that? And it's a number that can get people excited. 10 million of something valuable is an exciting thing. Um, Vesting, we just wanted to follow things that were happening at the protocol level, and hopefully we could make them happen at the community level. Every project we respected at the time was vesting tokens, and we didn't want to do obviously like a Bitcoin style vesting period where it's 50 years or something. We wanted to do something reasonable, and we thought it should be a standard. So it was 3 years initially. And what we learned from that is that the future of money is very similar to like kind of like the future of food. It's like very fast casual. So people are gonna want whatever they want. They're not. They may want their tokens released over a week period. They may want this or that, and so it's our job to really start customizing that, and that's kind of what we're thinking through now. Like,
Mm.
how do we service a party that wants to create party tokens for an event and they don't want 10 million, maybe they only want like 500. Like, how do we start thinking through these things? And so yeah, it's kind of like where we are.
And so relating back to role, right? Like you mentioned before, some of the Web Web3 kind of like older generation platforms thought everybody will use their own token. But I mean, while that is not feasible, in a way, Roll still needs to be sustainable as a platform and infrastructure, right? And so I understand that currently the business model is to take some percentage of all the tokens minted. And so how will these tokens be used or managed, right? How will then they be used for operation to sustain operations as well and relate to the wider long-term like business model?
Yeah, really good question. So, Roll currently holds 1% of all tokens that are issued. Used to be a much larger number, and then we realized that as DeFi was happening, it made a lot more. It made a lot more sense for Roll to take as small of a number as possible. It also allows folks that build on top of Roll to increase that model. So there's room for other platforms to charge a fee on top of that if folks want to issue through them, and we think that's pretty much the future. So when those tokens are minted, they're basically held in our wallets, and we're able to sort of now build this treasury, which is interesting, because as most protocols evolve, the end state you could imagine as sort of a DAO, and the treasury then belongs to the DAO, and so that's very exciting because we've never really seen that with tokens aside from the protocol's token. So Roll is pretty much eventually going to go to a DAO structure, and we'll create something fairly new that we really haven't seen because we haven't seen a protocol decentralized that mints many tokens. So what will eventually happen is, as you could imagine, tokens that may go to roll on the company level will now go to a different entity, I'll say. So we're excited about where that's heading, and the perpetuity of that, and how community will function. If you get someone really influential to issue on Roll, there's a whole group of people that can be a part of that success and have a vested interest in that success from day one. So it's really exciting to see. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I hear you talking about the role kind of like DAO and talking about decentralizing role. And I presume that must mean that the role tokens are on the horizon. So is there
Well,
anything you can share about that already?
yeah, we're not in any rush to do it. People have wanted us to create a token since late 2019. But realistically, we just want every token on Roll to be as successful as possible. So there's a few features that we would want to happen before Roll just has a token. Um, it's possible to have like deep liquidity in your token, but it's still a little hard because there's no feature. No one's really thought of the no one's really thought of the other side of staking. So like each time we're on a platform that stakes, we're there as an end user. We're not really there as someone creating the staking opportunity, and because none of those platforms have had the have had the circumstance where they're minting many tokens, and so that's Roll's circumstance. So we need to think about the other side of staking and how that would look and come across. So creators can create staking opportunities in their token. And so once we have these features out and liquidity is kind of a breeze for folks, we should be in pretty good shape. And then I think the next thing would be, yeah, thinking about the decentralization of Roll.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really exciting. It sounds like eventually, because you're taking so many tokens, it's I can imagine it's kind of like if Uniswap were to take some tokens from every single pool that existed on there, right? And what kind of treasury would that be built, right? It would kind of be a
Insane.
creator collective of sorts. It's like a creator index in a way of everything that has been ever issued on Roll, and then those can be used as well, right? Presumably, 1% is I mean, it's a significant number still, and I'm sure it'll be enough to um, use it for various utility purposes, right? Be it actually consume content, attend events on any of these creators' platforms. So I can see that being a perk of part of the role DAO, or even kind of like a freebie to give away for people to try out some of these creators, right? If the tokens are owned by Role, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean the goal there is for Roll to really be a beta for the entire next creator economy, right? So optimistically, everything that has value in a social token landscape mints through Roll. This could literally mean there's a platform that hosts an incubator where it mints tokens, but like that platform that hosts the incubator that mints tokens is powered by Roll, and so like we're thinking a lot about those models. So like it can be way up the stack, or an agency or something like that. But the idea is you can use these features. You could plug way into Web 2, which also means like fintech Web 2 too, like neobanks and just different types of platforms like those as well, where these tokens can exist. You can plug Web 2 fintech, Web 2 social, Web 3 proper, and just kind of go from there. So hopefully that value proposition um, helps Roll serve as a beta for the creator economy, and everyone across those platforms. When Lollapalooza mints a token, they can be a part of it and help it grow in a number of ways, right? All of a sudden, Lollapalooza is on a neobank, and it's on this card network, and it's on this social platform, and people are excited because they're already a part of the community because they're already a part of Roll.
Sounds like in terms of models, there's already a lot that you're thinking about. Is there anything you be able to share that's maybe a little bit more concrete? Anything you'd like to drop hints at, or tease some announcements?
Um, no, I think that's like pretty much where we're at. We're excited about if you're excited about social tokens and you're getting into the space and you're a developer, we'd love to help you understand the space and what's going on. And we'd love to have you hack around on our APIs next year. Roll's not going to try and be Web3 Clubhouse or Web3 Twitter or Web3 Twitch. Like, we want you to do that, and we'll probably invest in you or back you in some way there. We're doing a bunch of hiring, so we're seeing this mass migration from Web 2 into Web 3. So any back end or front end or designers or community managers, like we're definitely hiring for all the above, and excited to work with you guys.
Yeah, and we're excited to be part of the journey as well. So, wrapping up, just want to ask a few fun questions, right? What's your take on, we had so many ideas, right? So what do you think where do you think it's gonna go, specifically 1 year from now, right? What are some predictions, right? What will be here? How will some, say, tokenomics and all evolve? What are some predictions in terms of numbers as well, right? Adoption, or volume, or even on roll.
Yeah, so I'll do like 1 year and 5 years from now.
All right.
So yeah, 1 year from now, you're gonna start to see some very mainstream platforms use social tokens. In the same way, I bet no one thought that this year, if you were to rewind last year and you were to tell me that TikTok was going to issue NFTs, I'd be like, you're out of your mind. That's insane. But here we are. And so next year is going to blow your mind as well. Like, Web3 is going to continually blow your mind every year for the next like 10 years. So you're going to see some major platforms start playing around with social tokens as well, maybe major events. So the market's growing really crazily. So we're starting to see some serious volume on rolls. We're getting trading volume like 1 to 3 million a day. We're seeing markets in like the quarter billion range, which is really great. These things are tiny. I always like to tell folks, like, at the beginning of the year, like in January, DApp Radar said that Roll was like the highest volume social app, and so
Nice.
it was really interesting to see. And then this massive NFT boom came out, and so I think you'll start to see like the rise of social tokens again once a lot of these DeFi features come out, and you start to see a lot more issuers. Those numbers will grow. 5 years from now, like, you're gonna see most major platforms and fintechs will need to integrate social tokens because social tokens affect the economics of creators, which affects like the overall economics of the internet. So if the top 50,000 creators online have their own currency and you want your platform to still be around, whether that's a metaverse or a fintech or a platform, like you'll have to adapt to that reality. um, it would be as foolish as like not having e-commerce, right? And so like not being able to spend money on a website. And so who's the most valuable player there in that e-commerce world? It's Stripe. You can use Stripe and do this really easily. So we want Roll to have that positioning as well. You'll probably see the market start to eclipse the social tokens, start to eclipse the GDP of major cities. So I'm in New York. I like to think the GDP of New York is around 2.5 trillion. And so you'll literally start to see categories like, social tokens eclipse that. And that's something that we hope to do at Roll. Yeah.
Prediction: will we see a Bradley token as well, or why haven't we seen one yet?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. I'm fascinated by this category. Like the same way I was fascinated, like, a few years ago by like YouTube creating a donate button. I'm fascinated by like every creator that issues on Roll. I don't have as much time anymore, but I used to, when a streamer issued on Roll, I just used to hang out in their stream and I would see crazy things. Like someone would donate, they'd stop the stream and just be, start like, typing in their name and like bringing up the Roll app and like giving them tokens live. And I was like, oh my God, that's my app. And it's like on their stream. And so all this cool stuff is happening. Um, and so just helping the company get there, like as a CEO, just being the chief cheerleader is like where I am now. But like I'm pretty interested in things that are going on and ways to get involved. I'll say this, like social tokens are going to wrap around community product ideas. So,
Hmm.
like something like a podcast or a blog, um, or even like a think tank or a nonprofit, like any of these community concepts that people have, like they'll begin to get tokenized. And yeah, I'm looking at maybe one of those. So maybe just having it around a product that's around a community, more so than like me. So I may start something, I may not. Maybe it's a book or and like it'll have a token aspect to it probably in the next year or so.
Yeah, so you just picked up something interesting, which is the idea of even nonprofits, right? Because I think everything we've talked about so far relies on some form of revenue creation, right? If because you need product, service, or brand, even, and then like these are making money, and that's how the value is kind of like captured. It's how it's sustainable. But how would social tokens actually work for nonprofits, right? Why would people want those tokens? What can they then use it for?
Yeah, so it may change the idea of what a nonprofit is, because a nonprofit means that the entity that's created, the purpose of it isn't to take in revenue. But that doesn't mean that a nonprofit that creates a token can't have a network that has extraordinarily value. So like Red Cross has created an extraordinary amount of value for society. Um, Excuse me if that's not a nonprofit, but you could imagine, let's say it is. I don't know their legal status, but let's say it is a nonprofit. Um, if there was a Red Cross social token and it was done correctly, integrates with DeFi, other people can utilize the token across Web 2 networks and Web 3. That starts to be really interesting. In the same way that um, like the mechanics of like a nonprofit social token would be very interesting. People donate to nonprofits, but people may go out of their way to provide utility in that token, maybe as a way to like to donate because it's giving the protocol itself more value. So like you know Visa may give $100,000 to the Red Cross, but they could also list the Red Cross social token as a way to integrate into like 10,000 stores. And so like this, none of this has happened yet.
Hmm.
But these things are inevitable. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to play out. But nonprofits, of course, will issue tokens when the time's right.
Yeah, this really opens up a whole world of possibility, right? Because right now, let's say a charitable organization and you make some donations, or in order to survive, either you need to donate to the organization itself, or they need to take a cut from the charities in order to sustain their people and entire operations, right? But now, instead, they could be giving out the social tokens, even to incentivize donations and also to people who volunteer, people who contribute, and that either like reduces or eliminates the amount that they have to take, because the social token can function as sort of like money. If let's say I'm website hosting and accept social tokens, right, or I'm renting out a venue and accept your nonprofit social token as payment, essentially that works as your money. And people can give back to it in whatever form that they wish, right? So that's really interesting. And just expanding on the idea of nonprofits, that doesn't have to only be charitable organizations, right? It could apply to public goods infrastructure as well, because I think that's an idea that people have been struggling with, right? Let's say you have something like, just theoretically like a MetaMask, and maybe it doesn't make sense for a MetaMask to ever charge for people to use their wallet, but people like the brand, people like the community. Let's say they want to form a community around it. Could there be a case to be made for, say, a public goods type of social token for public goods, even like Web3 tools, or anything that is like a social good?
Yeah, absolutely. I think things like that will inevitably happen, and most people think of protocols as public goods, kind of at the end of the day, like Uniswap as a public good, or things like that. So I think that's sort of the goal. Um, there's a whole host of issues. Something we're like running across, which is we think we have a pretty big responsibility to guide this category the way Uber guided ride sharing or Airbnb guided hosting. And so the best way to do that is to kind of permission who can access the network. Like if Uber was to like, yeah, anyone can drive a car, you could, be part of the Uber network, like, that'd be crazy. Anyone can get behind the wheel. Or, Airbnb is like, hey, yeah, anyone can like, have this house up there. So, right now at the MVP level, Roll as a company is deciding who can issue. Eventually, of course, the DAO is going to make all decisions at the protocol level, and they could delegate to us, or they can make those decisions. But there's even more complicated decisions, like we're starting to get people that are maybe deeply political that want to have their currency, or have views that are like diametrically opposed to the views of us as founders, or different things like this. And so there's lots of really interesting things that are going to happen. You may see religions issue tokens, right? New micro religions may form, and or new political movements. And so we're starting to like talk to those people and like encounter them, and they're kind of like Twitter level problems. It's that idea where it's like, you're Jack and you're creating this internal messaging service, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden 10 years later you're affecting global politics. um, so it's like, what would happen if those political movements had their own currency and they had $40 million in liquidity? Is that good or bad for society? And the answer is we just don't know. That hasn't happened yet.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, if we're talking about the scale of like global religions and political leaders, that's wow. Okay, I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right? The implications are too huge and
The,
scary to even
the other thing someone brought
conceptualize.
up, yeah, the other thing someone brought up was like, like cancel culture. Like what happens when everyone has a token and can be canceled? Like, what's the Web3 equivalent? Is that shorting someone's token? Or
Yes. Yes.
cancel culture is kind of shorting someone if you think about it. It's like society shorting you. But yeah, if everyone has liquidity in that sense, it could be really, really interesting.
Yeah, maybe if we could just end on that, right? Which is some challenges and honest look at where we are and what we could face, right? Not just the good stuff, but also I think things like shorting. And I think right now in Web3, even there are a lot of people who are hunting for all sorts of like perks. So like Sybil attacking, these
Yeah.
airdrops, or kind of like over speculating, and that leads to some sort of like bubble for a social token shorting, like you mentioned. What what are some of these challenges, and how would we address them?
Yeah. I think our job is really just to introduce the infrastructure, for the space at large. Like this decade, we see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of social token platforms forming, just like you've seen NFTs in the past year. And so they'll have a whole host of issues because we don't really want to make decisions at the consumer level. We'll just kind of provide that infrastructure. But yeah, I think they'll have to either take a note from how Web 2 folks are dealing with that sort of thing, or form a new, way to think about it, which will probably be a DAO, right? There'll probably be some DAO committee that will say, like, yeah, this is 100% egregious, and like we should kick this person off the platform.
Hmm.
Or people are like, hey, this person should stay, and we should allow this.
Yeah, I guess one thing that social tokens have, which is an advantage over DeFi protocols, could be that because there's a community around it, it's about community first. And so community is law, even rather than code is law often for DeFi protocols, right? So if there was a hack, if there was some sort of like DDoS attack, Sybil attack, people flood in to like just take all the tokens or something, the core community can still fork it away and recreate a new social token mapped to some sort of like snapshot or same ownership. And it sounds to me more digestible, more palatable compared to a DeFi protocol doing that, because it's about the people, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, totally. If we're in a group of like beauty YouTubers, and this guy comes in and he's just like playing video games all the time, or just talking about sports, like, and there's like no feasible way to have him leave this Web3 community. Yeah, that beauty community DAO may kind of vote to eject him or do that, and you'll see a lot more agile things happen at sort of the Web3 community level that like probably aren't feasible at the protocol level.
Yeah, well, I guess we will see then. We will see, right? I think the core messages were so early in the social token space, and everybody's excited for it to take off. And thanks for all your predictions, explanations, and your time today, Bradley. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with? Any final messages? Maybe like a shout out or like some advice to creators out there? What would you like to say?
Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about Roll, you can go to tryroll.com. You'll see a little thing in the corner to create your own social token. You can do that there. And yeah, we're doing a whole bunch of hiring. So if you're an engineer or designer, or have just been fascinated with the space on a community level, we'd love to work with you. Oh, and just email me at bradley@tryroll.com, or catch me on Twitter. Just send me a note at Bradley underscore and Miles underscore.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for your time, Bradley. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks so much, She. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.